So when we first started exploring data lake technology, we were facing a lot of challenges with our on-prem environment. The environment wasn't scaling particularly well. We were running into constraints with what we were able to do with the data, and the engineering time that we were dedicating towards structuring data, pulling data into the environment, ensuring its accuracy, and ensuring that it was clean was growing. It was slowing down our analysts' ability to deliver insights to the business, which is ultimately what they cared about most. So we started looking at this technology, as a way to enable our entire team to move faster, to move up the value chain, and to increase our speed to value. When we first started looking at this, we really had to prove out the concept. So we looked at targeting very specific data sources that we thought would bring a lot of value to our customers. And we initially looked at building out our on-prem scripts up into AWS. So we took our targets, we migrated our scripts, and we brought them into a cloud native format. And from then on, it's been a process of iterating and going system to system, target to target, in order to optimize and structure our data. Our speed of value has increased immensely. Working on-prem, you have limitations with what you're able to do with the data, both from a computation standpoint as well as an accessibility standpoint. Analysts are continually working to ensure that they've got the right data pulled into the environment, that they're able to work with it, that they're able to run queries and structure data well. It's a significant constraint for any data team. Once we moved into the data lake, we were able to leverage the technology for its purpose. We were able to scale our compute quickly. We were able to access data and leverage it in ways that we had never been able to before. And ultimately, our analysts were able to walk into problem sets knowing that what they needed, they had available to them on demand, versus questioning whether or not they needed to go back to engineering and work to pull data in from its data source. So we have robust, workable, pliable, usable data that our analysts are able to work with end users to deliver valuable data solutions on. So initially we targeted ServiceNow as a proof of concept. This allowed us to effectively build out solutions around some of our core data that services our customers. From there, we were able to integrate in some of our provisioning systems that support the products and services that we've built out for our customers. So if we were to go into ServiceNow directly, there are systematic limitations to what you're able to do. There's limitations in terms of what you have access to, but in addition to that, there's limitations to what you can do with the data logically. If you were to try to replicate that data set in an on-prem environment, you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to engineer and structure data to ensure that data is being pulled into your environment cleanly and that it doesn't have any errors in processing. With our new environment, we have effectively pulled everything in, and we're pulling it in sync on a 15-minute interval. The data is clean, it's structured. We have its full history. We're able to look back across time in ways that would simply be economically impossible with an on-prem environment. So as our organization grows and matures when it comes to their discipline and practices leveraging data, it becomes increasingly important that we're able to service those use cases in modern ways. On-prem technology has been the staple for a long time, but it's very difficult to scale modern data techniques into a prem environment. It's especially difficult to do so cost effectively. Our new environment allows our analysts to go into conversations with our customers confident that not only do we have the tools and technologies equipped to tackle the challenges that they're going after, but we can take the conversation further and drive even more value by bringing forth technologies and use cases that perhaps the business has never even seen. It allows us to be highly prescriptive, it allows us to be highly targeted, fast with our delivery, and ultimately increase our speed to value significantly. So in one of our systems in ServiceNow, there is a table that is effectively inaccessible because of its size for a prem environment. We've gone after this data multiple times. It's systematically failed. There's richness in this data. It tells us a lot about the customer experience. It tells us a lot about what's going on, what's the behavior associated to the product or service. And moving into the cloud allowed us to do parallel processing, and run batch jobs. It allowed us to pull that data out. Being able to access this data allowed us to structure insights against activity that was going on in a very, very deep level in our systems. It allowed us to pull out insights that gave us the ability to proactively target troubled areas in products and services, and some of our products and services. One of the areas of data that was really hidden from our systems was flapping when a site that we were supporting was going up and going down continually. We were able to identify and understand how that flapping was impacting the customer experience. Ultimately, we were able to make proactive suggestions to our customers about how we can reconfigure the service, cut down noise to them while ensuring high availability for their sites. It's not just about being reactive. Ultimately, you want to be proactive. You want to be able to make intelligent, informed decisions, but also ensure that you're making decisions in a way that are optimal for the customer experience. That's really critical to what we do at CBTS. We're continually looking for ways to improve the customer experience while reducing inefficiencies. Part of setting up any strong recommendation, especially when it comes to identifying new segments, identifying potential opportunities for solutions for customers, is understanding that customer base. To do that, you really have to have a full visibility across your customer experience in order to understand where you want to optimize. Where are there opportunities for you to increase your penetration rate? What are the solutions that are best fit for your customer base? In order to do this, you really have to understand who your customer is. That's what it ultimately boils down to. What's powerful about the data lake is that it enables us to do just that. It allows us to blend data sources in really rich and meaningful ways that help us to pull together insights that would otherwise be obscured in these systems, that otherwise exist but are unconnected. The data lake allows us to connect these data sources in foundational ways that helps us to improve our insights into who our customers are and ultimately into who we are.
So one of our big focuses on data lake that we wanted to do within CBTS is to kind of do something a little bit different than what all of our competitors are doing. We wanted to actually give customers and ourselves internally essentially just a clean, pure, serverless, AWS-based data lake. The whole purpose of that is we're not locking ourselves or our customers in to any specific structure. It's theirs, the data is theirs, they can use it however they want, we can use our data however we want. We don't have to be confined to a specific program or a specific methodology of looking at the data. So as of right now, we've built what we're calling a few different products within the data lake. The whole idea is that we have this pure, clean core of what is the most basic of a data lake to be able to get data in there and start processing and querying data. Then we're building a plug-in style system that we're calling products that will let us grab data specifically from ServiceNow. Use something like a curl style integrator to go and grab data from a specific URL and download it in a standardized format over and over again. By building these products out though, we're also doing things within the ETL jobs within there of not only storing the pure original source format, but then also utilizing better overall like Parquet, JSON formats that are gonna work better into the data lake in general. For our customers, what this really means is kind of twofold. One, we're trying to get this out to customers in that it's an easy button method to launch a data lake. Right now, if a customer wanted to create a data lake serverlessly in AWS, they're going to have to hire AWS talent that knows how to get that working. They're also going to have to hire data talent to know how to get that data in there properly. We're trying to just really speed that along for a customer, have it ready to go in an easy deployable package. At this point, the core of the data lake, we could actually launch for a customer in about as little as 5 minutes. It's an extremely fast and quick, easy process. For us internally, it also means we get to start looking at our data. As Justin was talking about earlier, we have all these data sets within CBTS that honestly at this point, we haven't done a whole lot with, to be honest. We have ServiceNow data, we have Salesforce data, we have HubSpot data, we have Meraki data, we have AWS, we have Azure. The numbers go on and on. All of those right now are disparate systems that don't talk to one another. We're not asking for them to really talk to one another to make the data lake work. What we are trying to do is get all of their data into one general place that then our data scientists can figure out how to make it actually sync together properly and create their own queries, create their own data analytics to then drive more value, not just internally to CBTS, but also to our customers. So I know Justin talked a lot about some of the stuff we're doing with ServiceNow data. That's, to me right now, one of the biggest, most interesting ones. As Justin was explaining, one of the major advantages that we have is that we can actually do historical time change within ServiceNow data, delta of the data itself. So how did it change over the different periods of when we actually pulled the data? That's not a native service within ServiceNow. That's not something that they're going to be able to get straight out of the get-go. Just because we're running this internally on our service now, and we've built out the product of it, all we'd really have to do is change the endpoint and start pulling this from a customer's environment. A customer could be utilizing these exact same insights that we're figuring out internally for time for ticket resolution, for root cause analysis resolution, a number of P1 incidents that happen within their company. These are standardized things within ServiceNow, but they don't necessarily have to apply just to CBTS. They could be applied to any company. We're launching everything as infrastructure as code. And that infrastructure as code has been pushed against our internal cloud security posture management tool. At this point, it's InfoCloudSec, used to be called DivvyCloud. But we're actually checking to make sure that we are meeting all of the standards of both the AWS Center for Internet Security benchmarks, as well as the cybersecurity framework. That way we're making sure simple things, just like any object that goes into S3, any file basically that is pushed into storage is being encrypted. That the encryption keys are not able for anyone just to get to. And then with the whole fact that we're using AWS as the core, IAM, identity and access management, is baked into AWS in every aspect. A user only will have access to the data that they are granted. It has to be explicitly listed within AWS for that user to even have access to the data to begin with. So we're making sure that there's controls all along the way. So we've talked a lot about the ServiceNow table downloader. That's been a big one that really we've kind of gone through initially. The other kind of products that we've built out so far are much more generic data sets. So how can I pull data from this URL? Or how can I just already have a bucket that I can drop my data into that then is going to get scanned and ready to actually be queried within the data lake? Well, much like we've done with ServiceNow, we want to make a number of other products that are going to be very specified to a piece of software or a overall workload. So we're looking at Salesforce, we're looking at Meraki, we're looking at Science Logic EM7. Any of these things that have open APIs that we can pull the data from, honestly, we should be. And we need to actually still create the products around those so we can have standardized reports, so we can have standardized dashboards, and really more meaningful data out of those products. Since we've done this internally, we do have people on Justin Grieshop's team and on some other teams throughout that have both the AWS experience and the data experience to really help a customer not just get it started, but then to continue to actually further process their data and further refine for their specific needs. The beauty of doing this as a serverless data lake is we can scale almost infinitely. We're not constrained to number of CPU cores or amount of memory that a system has. By utilizing AWS's native services, we are only limited to the amount of processing power that AWS's data centers have. We can run batch jobs and have literally hundreds of workers spun up instantly. There is almost zero limit to it, and honestly, if AWS does have a limit, they're just soft limits that we can request that they lift them anyway. We've had to do that in a few cases, not really with batch jobs, but with some other systems there. But as this scales, the whole concept is also utilizing S3 object storage. So it's at this point costing, I think, around 4 cents per gigabyte of data stored. That's incredibly cheap. Doesn't matter if you're handling text files, if you're doing any type of data, if you're even just pulling data pulls, even if they're video files. The storage is so cheap that you cannot really beat it anywhere on premise. And then also with the elasticity and durability that AWS provides, I believe at this point it's 11 nines of durability. Yeah, that data is not going to go anywhere. The chances of you actually losing any of it is so very slim that it's a much safer place to put it. So aging databases, man, those are always fun. So that's actually one of the products we've been looking at, is being able to pull old data off of aging databases. Most customers have processes that they need to run maybe once or twice a year and look back at historical data that might go back 10 plus years. They only use that data once per year usually though. Most of the time they're working within a small time frame, usually a year or two at most. Why should you keep all that on your database then? That 10 plus years of data. We can pull all that out and then be able to put it into the data lake. by pulling that excess data off of your internal database, you've now freed up more resources to be able to query those tables faster. And getting a little nerdy into it, your table scans are going to be a lot shorter. Doing any type of larger indexing is going to be a lot faster because you don't have nearly as many columns and rows of data to look through. Being able to push that into then also a data lake, you can still use the same query language formatting to grab that from Athena, much as though your data people would right now from your relational database, whether it be MySQL, MS SQL, Oracle, etc. All right, the Simple Data Integrator is essentially our very quick, give me the URL and I'll go grab the data for you. We've created a quick little just web page interface. So literally you can put in just what URL do you need to go fetch data from. As long as it can be reached from the internet, it'll go grab it and start downloading the files. Because of us handling it for you, we also are already naming the files in a specific convention that's going to be very friendly to the data lake. We're making sure that the source copy, again, that raw, pure, clean data, and the process copies are going to be kept separately. And we're also doing a conversion from JSON, CSV, what other format you might come in with, out into Parquet format. Now, here's where we really get nerdy about Parquet format. Parquet lets you partition data in the file itself. So when we're talking about actually querying data within AWS Athena, which is really what the core purpose of the data lake is, it has to scan through the data that it knows to look at to be able to pull out any of the results. Well, if you're looking at a very large CSV file, it's going to have to scan through gigabytes of data potentially to be able to grab that. Parquet format can still be gigabytes of data, but the file itself is actually partitioned in multiple parts. So what might have taken 2 to 3 gigabytes of data to scan now might only be scanned in 6 megabytes. And really then that leads into even more cost savings because the way that Athena and the data lake in general works, you're really only charged for usage. So the time the queries run and the amount of data that is being processed is where you actually get charged. So if you're looking at doing this over time and over scale, you're going to save more money by really going on making sure that your data is in a good, clean format to begin with. So internally, right now, CBTS has lots of disparate systems. We have, and we kind of spoke of this a little bit earlier, but they're not talking to each other. We're not really analyzing that data. There's a lot of meaningful data inside of our tickets in ServiceNow. There's a lot of meaningful data that comes out of our ScienceLogic EM7 that actually generates the alerts to begin with. We can then also cross-examine that data against things like Salesforce to see how many people are actually working on a specific project at a given time and be able to look at anything from really financial analysis all the way up through just time analysis. How many people do we have working on a specific project? Is it effective? Are we making money off of this? Or are we actually losing money? We can look at the data in ways that it's not going to tell us directly out of the program itself and really build upon that. Another thing that we're strongly looking at is how can we build better interfaces for customers. More and more customers are coming to us asking essentially for business intelligence, not just are things performing smoothly, but what can I do to make it better? What can I do compared to what my competitor is doing? Well, by being able to actually analyze this data, we're going to be able to generate things like graphs and dashboards, and even just generate reports that are not available from the systems themselves. Justin Grieshop's team is doing a great job right now doing this with our ServiceNow data internally and combining it with things like Meraki, and it is Meraki, right? Okay, so internally we're doing this a lot with HubSpot, Meraki, and ServiceNow data, and really intermixing the three to come up with reports that no single one source could give you internally by itself. With all of these different things, think how many different of our customers have more than just one service from CBTS. We should be able to actually have business intelligence about their multiple services, how they mesh together, and how we are serving them as a customer. Let's talk about pain.
Let's talk about pain, right? So it's really difficult to get to data. It's
totally.
really difficult to manage data well. It's really difficult to build on data and with data. I think part of what makes this offering so valuable, it's definitely been what's so valuable to our team, is you've simplified our accessing of information, our ability to work with it, and we're now moving faster than we ever could before.
That's fantastic. And I mean, that's also kind of what part of the idea of this is at the core is, unlike other competitors potentially in the market, we're not trying to force anyone to use a specific tool set. We're not trying to force a specific mindset of how the data needs to go. We're just trying to utilize and make an easy method to use a serverless data lake in AWS. You don't even have to use AWS's tools to look at that data. You might be using Power BI. You might be using something else to actually analyze the data. But the sheer fact is you can query just non-relational database objects and fetch that data that you want.
Well, that value was immediately obvious to the team because we didn't feel shoehorned into a solution. Actually, we felt really heard. And some of the struggles that we faced as a team, we've been facing for 5+ years. And when it came to leveraging this technology, it was a matter of months before some of the things that we wanted to do forever began to be broken down and actually look achievable. It was a really big step forward, not just for the organization, but for the team culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We went from a position of what can we do to what could be done. And that, for us, was transformation that we got to take out into the business and we got to bring to users. We are increasingly excited about what it means for our end users because we see the power of that technology.
And the what could be done is really also, like, that is also one of the core tenets of it. By trying to utilize these standardized tools that AWS has provided, we're not going to limit any of that future. And as AWS constantly releases more and more tools, they're getting deeper in data analytics. They're getting deeper into machine learning and AI. We can utilize that. There's nothing that's blocking it. There's no limitations around it.
Absolutely. I mean, we face the staunch fact that we have some fantastic professionals here, but we are not Google.
No.
We're not going to be able to develop an AI that is going to be groundbreaking. But that doesn't mean we can't leverage commoditized AI and machine learning. That doesn't mean we can't leverage best practice models. That doesn't mean we can't do what the big guys are doing. In fact, we might even be able to do it better because we will be faster, we'll be nimbler with the people and resources that we have because we're going after very specific use cases in an intelligent way built on AWS best practices.
Talking about some of these pain points too, I know one pain point that a lot of other customers have when they're looking at big data structures. They're looking at more classic Hadoop or BigQuery or other ones that have existed for a long time is cost.
Yes.
How has our data lake really kind of helped you out with the cost aspect there?
The cost has been amazing. Frankly, I didn't believe it when I first saw it because when you move to a completely serverless environment, what you're removing is the cost component, not just in the management, but in the actual cost of the resources. We can scale up effectively, elastically with AWS, and our data and our use cases are all the better for it.
Now, I know we've talked about AWS a whole lot with this too. One thing I do want to make clear for anyone that's watching too is that AWS is not the only place that this data can be. It's realistically, we're just using AWS's Athena more or less behind the scenes to actually query the data and pull it in. As long as it doesn't matter where the data source lives. The original data source could be in Azure. It could be on-prem workloads. It can be things like even cloud service as a solution providers like Cloud ServiceNow or others out there. Doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, that's what's so fantastic about the flexibility. You know, working with CBTS engineers is always great, but working with CBTS engineers where we can commoditize and leverage best practice models is infinitely valuable. We're able to start blending data sources across the spectrum. And it is not just, as you're saying, it's not just AWS. We're looking at data sources that span MySQL databases, SQL servers, SaaS providers. We're going all over the place. And I think we're a lot like a lot of customers. A lot of customers have disparate data sources that aren't connected. And that's really the value here, is we're able to bring that all into one place. We're able to tap it. We're able to work with that data in really simple ways. It's immensely valuable for our analysts.
So we've talked about a few products that we've kind of already built into this with the Simple Data Integrator, the ServiceNow Table Downloader. Realistically, where do you see would be the best fit of a next product?
So when I start thinking about the technologies that AWS allows us to tap into, I start thinking of things like chatbots. One of the things that I would really love our team to be able to develop and deploy is a queryable chatbot that says, hey, we've got this clean, pristine data source that has blended data architectures across Salesforce, across HubSpot, across ServiceNow. Being able to query query that data once we get it into a pristine state and service that to end users. Ultimately, they don't want to wait on us, right? They're looking for answers. And the faster we can enable them to deliver or the faster we can enable them to answer the questions that they have, the better. That means quicker speed to value, faster speed. That means faster speed to value. It means that they're able to service our customers more effectively. It means that they're able to make timely decisions. Ultimately, if we can enable users to make better decisions in real time, that's the crux of transformation.
So let's talk about where else we can actually look at some business drivers here. So one of the things that we're looking at from the technical side is professional services. So we're talking about this being a product, we're talking about something that can be sold to customers quite a bit, or even that can just be utilized by CBTS to enhance our existing products quite a bit. But what we haven't talked about much really is the professional services side of it. We've talked, I spoke a little bit earlier about how it takes a customer quite a bit of AWS knowledge and quite a bit of data scientist knowledge basically to launch one of these serverless data lakes to be able to really utilize it as they should.
Yeah.
Professional services is something that we're strongly looking at with that of just being able to set a bucket of hours out there that, hey, we've done this. Let us come and help you to optimize your data and stuff. Like I know within just our data lake group that's been working some with you especially, we've essentially been giving you professional services quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like, can you talk a little bit about how, say, especially like say Tim has helped optimize your batch jobs, optimize the data pools, and how that's looked not just from a billing perspective, but also from a overall usability perspective for you?
Yeah, so one of the things that Tim has been fantastic and really at the crux of the transformation for us. And not only did he instantiate and build out a lot of the infrastructure that we have today, he's also looking at how do we proactively and programmatically drive down our costs and drive down our costs on a month-by-month basis. Just this last month, he was able to optimize data sets to drive out 36% of our environmental costs.
Ooh.
It was huge, and he did so. This is the excellence of CBTS engineering, though, right? This is what you get when you work with highly trained engineers who understand the impact that they're bringing to the organization. And Tim understood very well what we were trying to do, and he understood very well how he could help. And in that sense, Tim is continually looking for areas to optimize. He's continually looking for areas to improve our architecture, and continually looking for areas that we can be more effective in terms of our overall configuration.
And so you talked about how he helped you guys to, drastically reduce that bill. When we were even talking about your bill in the first place,
right?
What scale are we talking here? Are we talking hundreds, thousands, millions?
I mean, it's actually a little embarrassing, but it's less than $1,000, right? So we're and that.
But that's amazing in and of itself. We're showing just how much you can actually have such a very low cost compared to so many other competitors out there.
Exactly. There might be a tendency to say $1,000. They can't really be doing that much, but that's not the case. We are actually doing quite a bit. We have pulled in some immense data sources, and we're going after more. What Tim showed us in the way that he has gone about this design and engineering is that if we structure this well up front, and if we build this right, then we can continually leverage those efficiencies. We can continually leverage those economies of scale. And so even though we are expecting to grow our environment in terms of the number of data sources we're going after, I'm not expecting a big balloon in our costs because Tim is taking the time to do this right. So AI and machine learning, there's a lot of buzzwords that come along with that. And it feels like every vendor pitch I'm listening to, someone's talking to me about some AI that they've stood up, some machine learning model that they're going to tap into. And I've seen firsthand that there's some really great examples out in the market, and then there's some other examples that are maybe less than compelling. What's really awesome about, what's really meaningful about the way the data lake is set up is that we can leverage machine learning and AI in a very non-buzzwordy way. And what I mean is AWS makes machine learning and AI much more approachable. As long as you have your information set up and your data set up in an appropriate way, you can leverage best practice models in a very straightforward way. the way that the lake is configured and the way that the data sets in the lake are configured allow us to go after that data and tap into those industry best practices. That means that a team that doesn't have 10 PhDs, that means a team that doesn't have 25 data scientists working to build out rich
and meaningful
rich
data.
and meaningful, right? It is though. It's the right adjective. It's just I use it a lot. That means that a team that doesn't have 25 PhDs can tap into some of the most powerful technologies in the industry.
Yeah, and exactly what you were talking about there, the way that we've set up the data lake, just with the standardizing of how the data is being processed and put into Parquet format, realistically what's happening behind the scenes is there's essentially a crawler that goes over top of all that to make that into a queryable format. That AI and ML levels, any of those apps that are being used along with that, basically do the exact same thing. They're looking for, how do I have this data standardly set? How do I parse this data? We've already got it in that format. Those ML can just crawl right over it and get the data and be able to use it.
Exactly. And so what that has meant for our team is that AI and machine learning has gone from what's effectively a buzzword to what can be done.
To a real possibility.
It's a real possibility now. We're excited. We're actively going after use cases. We're actively targeting and engaging customers. And we think this is just there's going to be a cornucopia of an explosion in terms of the value we're able to bring for our customer base.
What kind of insights can we be looking at from some of the data we get from this that we can put into, say, like a dashboard? I mean, there's always like the very standards of like how many rows of data were pulled or how many unique records there were, but like what kind of more meaningful insights can we get from something like, say, ServiceNow data that you guys are already looking at?
Like any system, there are canned reports that you will get, and everybody gets those reports. And as we kind of talked about, the real value in the data exists in blending those architectures, right? It exists in taking those data sources and looking across them and seeing how those activities influence each other. What's really powerful about the way that we've set up the data lake, and I think where there's going to be a lot of value for our customer base, is we're not reinventing the wheel every time. If we go into a data source for the first time, right, we're learning that effectively from scratch. And every data team who is doing something similar is doing the same thing. They're looking at a gigantic data model. They're looking at a gigantic data schema, and they're trying to figure it out for themselves. What's fantastic about the data lake and the way that it's set up is it's going to allow us to leverage best practice models that exist, but rather than reinventing them every time, simply building out dashboards that help you get to the crux of what you're most likely trying to accomplish. 80%, I would estimate, 80% of the use cases across different organizations are effectively the same. We're doing very similar things, but we lack the tools to get to that blended spot. And so you've got teams that are out there working to get to these blended architectures and best practices. And it's extremely expensive, it's extremely time intensive, and it's, as we talked about with on-prem data source, it's error prone. And so we're able to shortcut that, and I think that the data lake is going to help us really get to a place where we can see where those best practices are emerging in those blended data sets.
And I think you hit something really well right there too, talking about 80%. Usually when you're getting customer data, 80%, about 4 out of 5 graphs or charts that are being shown in a dashboard are what every customer wants to see.
Yeah.
That still leaves 20% though. And that's where we can potentially even work in with the customer, professional services work, to customize them for them.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking, we have full control over the data here. We have full control over what we do with it. We're not limited by any internal tools.
And that's where you're not looking at 6 to 8 months ramp up trying to figure out that system. You're leveraging expertise that has been leveraged across different organizations. We're shortcutting that time for you because we know how those systems work together, and we've been doing this for customers for a long time.
And with that, we probably already know how the data exists, how it's structured, and to be able to get that specific query that they want, to get that specific bit of data out. I'm not going to say it's not always the easiest thing on earth, but it's not going to be that difficult.
What was once unscalable becomes achievable, and with the expertise, you're not just getting a data expert, you're getting an expert who has inherent experience in your domain.
Very well said.